Howdy, folks. Welcome back to JJ's Library and Readings. Hope y'all are doing well today. I'm in a pretty good mood. Um, Yesterday was a shorter chapter. Today's even shorter. But I like to break them up by chapters, makes it easy for y'all to follow along. Um, which can kind of suck if, like, you just want to chill for a while and, like, listen to something. But if y'all want me to read more chapters, please, feel free to comment below. But I think we should go ahead and get started. I hope you all are laying down in bed, or you just got off work, or maybe you just got back from a date. You're home in the comfortable silence and got your caffeine free coffee. You already smoked your cob, brushed your teeth. I say let's hop into it. So we're back with Between Two Fires. Now we are on chapter 20 of Monsters and of Blessings. Despite the wide berth they gave to the city of Bune, they did not see evidence of Delphine's monsters in the farmlands just south of the town. A tree in the middle of a field had all the leaves stripped from it, and now its branches hung with people and animals, all still as herrings. A fire twinkled at the base of the tree. They were being smoked. A heap of clothes lay nearby, as well as a separate pile of logs to feed the fire. A large, recently dug hole gaped in the side of a hillock not far from the tree. The darkness of this hole was preternatural, something to push back against the daylight. It was big enough for men on slits to have entered without ducking. At the entrance to the hole was a scattering of feet. Whatever it was, it didn't like feet. Something moved in the darkness of the hole, and they heard a sound that was somewhere between a rattling groan and an insect's buzzing. The mule sped up his trot with no encouragement from his driver. That night and the next day brought them tremendous luck. The town of Chagny had not admitted them, but 3 miles on they were able to find a functioning inn that was willing to rent them a room, and use it of a dry stable. The man who ran the inn was a former Franciscan monk who had left orders and taken a wife. The very same who now served them was a watery radish soup with some bitter green in it. Outside near the well, a statue of the saint covered in little stone birds and a well shat on by living ones looked towards the gate. It was the innkeeper's avowed belief that the saint himself protected his house from plague, as well as from the things that had hammered their way into Bune, and sometimes ranged as far from Shagny. Have you seen them? Thomas asked him. Yes, he said in a very final way, looking down. He said no more about them. One other guest shared the inn that night, a young merchant from Tuscany who was on his way home from Paris on foot. His French was terrible, but the priest figured out from his badly grafted snatches of Franco Italian that his wife had gotten a letter to him saying she was still alive. He took it out and cried over it and asked the priest to kiss it and to touch it with a rosary. He did. His translation of news from home gave them a taste of Florentine dark humor. The mass graves with their layers of bodies, lime and dirt, had inspired the less reverential Tuscans to say the dead had gone to the lasagna. Ronaldo Carnoboli had thick, well-shaped eyebrows over his almond eyes, and Delphine found herself wishing she were the wife who had sent him the letter, alive in Italy with a handsome man walking home to her. She found herself looking at his hands as he spoke, and wondering what those hands would feel like touching her hair. In her innocence, she imagined him petting her hair as if she were a kitten. She knew they were more than that, but she contented herself with letting her thoughts run to the edge of that cliff without looking over. Suffice it to say that she had very much liked for the Italian to pet her hair. Her gaze was so intense that the Tuscan caught her looking and smiled, indicating her to the others with a nod and flick of his expressive eyes. I'm not going to try to pronounce that word. But he said, as if that explained everything, eliciting a chuckle from Thomas. You could come with us, the priest said at one point, as far as Avignon, at least, the Italian understood and nodded slowly, considering. The sparrow was fluttering in Delphine's chest now. She was enjoying herself so much, mooning over her new infatuation, that she wished it would go away, but it fluttered harder and harder until she spoke. Please don't come with us. The Italian understood that. Why, why you say this thing? She just stared at him. He laughed. What, you not like my face? She answered him in rapid, perfect Florentine Italian. Nobody else at the table could follow what the girl was saying, but his face went white, and he excused himself and went to bed. What did you tell him? The innkeeper asked, crossing himself. She looked into her empty soup bowl. I don't know. The Italian came with them as far as Chalon-sur-Saône, walking beside the car on his nimble young legs. He carried a bow and had 6 arrows left in his quiver, and soon after the departure agreed to accompany Thomas into a patch of woods to hunt. Thomas, stripping out of his armor near the cart, guessed from Rinaldo's gestures that he intended to shoot 1 arrow, and that he would not shoot a second for any reason or whatever. If that was what he said, he proved himself a liar. They moved on slightly as they could in the brown leaves, following a sort of path in the undergrowth that less experienced hunters than the Italian might have missed. To his eye, the broken twigs, missing leaves, and bent grass were as plain as a Roman highway. The trail led to a lush dip in the land where crabberry apples had been savaged further through. He pointed and winked at Thomas, splaying his fingers over his head to suggest horns, as if to gesture summon them. Antler marks appeared on the bark of a chestnut tree, with little bits of velvet adhering. This would be a good place. The men crouched up when Thomas' straw hat covered in branches, both of their faces darkened with mud. Thomas, having no bow, held his sword over his shoulders, knowing that his limited role encompassed only protecting Rinaldo, and if they were lucky, holding back their prize. They were just about to give up, having been out for 2 hours or more. The fear of being caught at night, too close to Beugnane and Chadney, finally overcoming their hunger when they saw the stag. It entered the woods before them at a kingly slow walk, its coat the same reddish brown as the carpet of leaves below it. Its antlers were magnificent, a trophy Thomas would love to set on his hearth in Picardy, though he knew he would never take such a prize as inept as he was with the bow. Rinaldo drew his breath in and drew the fletching of the arrow halfway to his cheek. He would pull it all the way and release in the same motion as soon as the deer turned to its side in the back of them. He never got the chance, though. The deer heard something moving in the brush near to the 2 men and raised its head. 10 steps closer, and Rinaldo would have loosened at its exposed chest, but at this distance he would have to shoot higher to account for the drop, and he didn't want to strike its head or clip its nose, wounding the magnificent thing for no reason. The noise came again, crackling of leaves, louder this time. The deer left, not at a run, but too quickly for the Italian to adjust for both its motions and the saplings it crossed behind him. He grimaced with his mouth open, the breath steaming out between his clenched teeth, still tracking the stag in case it turned, but it did not seem likely to do so. He felt Thomas's hand on his shoulder and reluctantly turned his head away from the disappearing deer. Thomas was looking at him as if to say, Can you believe this? In a time of famine, when poaching laws were forgotten, and men had all but emptied the woods of game, one magnificent trophy animal had been saved by a second. A wild boar snuffed in the brush, and yet unaware of the hunters. Again, says something. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Renault whispered, drawing the bow again and loosening. His arrow sank into the cheek of the wild boar, causing it to squeal and lash out in all directions with its tusked snout. He drew a second arrow, and that as when it looked its black little eyes on him and indicted him as the source of its pain. It charged. He was now glad for the broad-shouldered Frenchman beside him, who he had regarded as something as hindrance on a deer hunt. This was a goddamned big boar. Rinaldo knew Thomas had stood up to a crouch and cocked his sword for a two-handed thrust, but he was too busy loosening his second arrow to see that Thomas was smiling like a little boy. And so as the four of them approached Chalon with their bellies full, a blanket full of cooked meat in the cart, and in possession of the boar skin that had kept Rinaldo Cabloni warm on his long trek over the mountains, since the girl had told him he would surely die if he came with them to the river. He might have dismissed this warning, but she also not told about his wife Katina prayed for him each night, looking out the window that gave on with the Arno. That when she prayed, she held between her clasped hands a little figurine of an angel he had carved for her from the bones of the stag he brought her father on the day he asked to marry her. Although Rinaldo would never see the priest, the girl, or the knight again in this world, he would bid them farewell on the banks of Sion as they embarked in the company of dangerous men. His hard-won reunion with Cartina would be celebrated in a public feast of which half the town would gather. The couple's embraces would inspire a local sculptor to carve an Apollo and Daphne so beautiful that the Apollo's fingers would be worn away with 2 centuries of women kisses. Wow, that was a good chapter. I'm glad that there's happy endings sometimes in this book. A lot of this book can be sad, but it's really good, and I hope you all enjoyed that chapter. I hope that you now get some good sleep, or maybe you are coming off a break and have to go back to rake, whatever it may be. I hope you all have an excellent day or night. As always, good morning, good evening, good night. I'll see y'all next time.